Sound is.
Hey guys, Tom here with a quick message before we dive into this episode of the podcast. Since recording this particular episode, we were all shocked by the train tragedy that happened in Greece. Our thoughts have constantly been with the families of all those who lost their loved ones ever since. It's important for us to mention this because had this episode been recorded after the tragedy, we no doubt would have spoken about it, and our overall outlook might not have been as positive. That's important context for what you're about to hear. We hope that the positivity of our guest, through his words and his work, serve as inspiration to us all and help us all work towards a time where accidents like that don't happen. We hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast. Nick, it's been a big few weeks for Ouzo Talk with the caliber of guests we've had, hasn't it?
It has been huge. I don't know how we keep on topping it every fortnight, but we seem to do it.
I know. I mean, every single guest that we get has something unique to bring to this conversation, and I guess it's so important. I feel as though we have some kind of a responsibility now in terms of bringing people the caliber of which we've been bringing to be sort of role models for the rest of our community, and that's kind of the mail that we've been getting about it, hasn't it?
Definitely. Look, like you hit the people we're inviting, they're just experts in their fields. I'm not talking just in Australia, but worldwide. You know, we're tapping into the globe now. Greeks who are successful from a globe perspective. So massive responsibility from us, mate, bringing these people on. Somehow we're doing something right.
Big shoes to fill. But, well, true to form, today's guest is also very special, in particular to me, because I've looked up to this guy for a long time and drawn a lot of inspiration from him professionally. So do you want to know who we've got with us?
Hit me with it. All
right, let me introduce him to you. So, our guest was born in South Africa, but's lived and worked everywhere from Hong Kong to Mexico to New York, where he's plied his trade as a brand strategist. Now based in Athens, he's in many ways become a rock star of brand and marketing, thanks in part to a now iconic presentation that he gave in 2011 in the midst of the Greek economic crisis, aptly titled Rebranding Greece. His quest to improve Greece's brand image has even spawned movements like Gillette. He has managed and grown leading ad agencies in South Africa, Hong Kong, Greece, Mexico, and the United States, including at McCann Erickson Worldwide, where he was responsible for the global management of the $1.8 billion Coca-Cola advertising account. But it's at TBWA Worldwide that he worked on one of brand and marketing's most iconic campaigns. Mm-hmm. In 1997, he was responsible for the overall global management of the Think Different campaign, following the return of Steve Jobs to Apple. Wow. A campaign that set the platform for everything we now know about Apple, including the iMac, iPod, iPad, and iPhone, none of which existed up until that point, I might add.
Wow.
Since moving and making the decision to move to Greece permanently, he founded his own company, Felix B&I, where he's managed clients such as Audi, Heineken Breweries, Coca-Cola, the International Olympic Committee, Affidea Medical Group, Seychelles Tourism, Super Yacht Builder, Ocean Co., and many others. He's received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Hellenic Council of America, and his work has even been recognized by US Congress. Joining us from Athens today with his coffee and water in tow is the incomparable Peter Economides. Peter, welcome to Ouzo Talk, my friend.
Welcome, Pete.
Great to be here. Great to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I really hate the fact that, you know, with the time difference, we can't both share an Ouzo together. But look, we're gonna try to keep it together. There we go.
I'm pretending, okay? Just pretending. Okay. Cheers.
Just so everyone knows, I mean, right now, what time is it here in Sydney? It's about 7 o'clock, which means it's 10 a.m. in Athens. Yep. Far too early for an ouzo, unless you're from my part of Greece in Kerkira, where they put ouzo in their Greek coffee.
Breakfast.
Exactly.
Hard people in Kerkira.
What's the weather like in Athens, Peter? It's I hear it's quite cold.
Well, it's a beautiful sunny day today. It's been very cold the past few days, but today looks really fantastic, I'd say. I haven't been out yet.
Yeah.
It could still be cold.
Wow, it's good that it's sunny. It should be normally snowing at this time of year, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm jealous of anyone who's in Athens.
I'm down in Pula on the beach, so it very seldom snows down here.
Okay. Well, we'll be in Athens in a few months.
We will be.
Maybe we can catch up.
We will be. We'll be down there to do some podcasting. So, yeah, maybe we can meet up for a drink somewhere.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you guys here.
Perfect. And toast properly.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we should probably get into the episode properly. What do you reckon?
Sounds good. Let's go.
Well, as we go to the music, I have a little surprise for you, Nick. You ready for it?
I am, mate. I like surprises.
What did you think of that, mate?
How good is that?
Could you see that on your end, Peter?
Yeah, it's great.
So that's our new intro. I thought, what better way to launch it than with a brand strategist with us,
Yeah, it's
fully knowing that
well
he
done.
might not like it.
Well, it sounds like we got
Fabulous.
there you go. We got like a thumbs up already.
Very good.
Fantastic.
Very good.
Well, that comes to us courtesy of our friend CGI Joe, who's been working on that in the background for quite some time now. And yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic animator and filmmaker as well. Joe's not Greek, but he had the good sense to marry one. So, Joe, wherever you are, mate, if you're listening, thank you very much for your work.
So what are you saying? He saw the light and married a Greek.
Absolutely, he's Lebanese. So
So he couldn't be Greek, so I'll marry one.
that's it.
Well done, Joe. You're a champion.
Anyway,
That was fantastic. Look, anyone out there who's interested in stuff like that, reach out to us. We'll put him in contact with Joe.
CGI Joe, there you go.
CGI Joe. G.I. Joe. I like that name.
Absolutely. Peter, again, thank you for joining us, but let's start off with the basics. Tell us a little bit about your Greek heritage and the sort of circumstances of your parents or grandparents leaving.
Okay, so let me go back in history a bit. My grandparents on my mother's side are from the island of Imbros, and they left in 1922, I believe, and they went down to South Africa. And on my father's side, they were from Larissa. Their circumstances were purely economic. On my father's side, they were economic migrants, whereas on my mother's side, it was necessity. They had to get out of there, and they had nowhere to go, and they went straight down to South Africa. So they went down there, and on both sides, my parents were born in South Africa, and obviously the family was as well. 3 kids. I'm the middle one. My older sister and my younger brother. I've got a photograph of my grandfather's very first business. Very enterprising fellow, by the way. Within a couple of years, he'd established a business down in South Africa. It was a grocery store, a delicatessen, and he called it the Australian Cash Store.
Really?
And I would say to
Why?
myself, why
Is there a
did
connection?
he do that? Maybe he thought he was in Melbourne and he didn't know.
Classic. Got on the wrong boat.
Unbelievable.
It was either genius or a huge mistake.
By the way, brilliant branding, huh?
Yes.
The Australian Cash Store in the middle of South Africa. I mean, that's really
Classic.
That's fantastic.
So they jumped on a boat, both landed at the same time, or were they on the same? Did they meet on the
more or less
boat?
the same time. My parents were born down there. My mother's family at that time had become rather well established. He was very successful, my grandfather. Whereas on my father's side, they were struggling, frankly. My father left school when he was age 13 to go and sell newspapers. When he met my mother, her parents were not too keen on the match because they somehow felt that he was coming from a poorer family and he couldn't look after my mother and all sorts of stuff like that. But they blessed the marriage and went ahead, and that's how we all came to be, the 3 of us. Yeah, it's amazing.
What part of South Africa, Pete? Were you
This
born
was
and raised?
in a little city just outside Johannesburg called Germiston.
Interesting.
Okay.
And was there any other Greek community in that part of the world at the time?
Oh yeah, there were quite a few Greeks. Not when my grandparents went out.
Right.
When they went out, they were amongst the first. But by the time that we arrived on the scene, there were quite a few. There were quite a few Greeks around, yes, and a thriving community, I must say. So my dad, a couple of words about my dad. Remarkable fella, absolutely remarkable fella. Despite his lack of education and his very humble beginnings, he went on to become a major industrialist in South Africa, producing cranes and machine tools and all sorts of very sophisticated stuff. Massively successful, unbelievable, and a great inspiration to me, I should add.
Wow.
A quick story about my dad. His dream was that I should work for him
Right.
and take over the business, right? Like many Greek immigrant parents.
Yes.
And one day I said to him, Dad, it's not what I want to do. He looks at me and says, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a big deal on Madison Avenue. He says to me, where the hell is that? So I kind of explained where Madison Avenue was. And he looks at me with a huge smile on his face. And he said to me, go and show them who we are.
Wow.
And I left with wings on my back, I tell you. And that's how my whole career started. It was remarkable. Absolutely remarkable.
I mean, what's interesting about that response is that we've spoken to a number of other Greeks, particularly in Australia, where they have that moment where they need to confront their parents and say, I don't want to be in the family business. And it hasn't gone the way it went with you and your father.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And that's what set you on the path of your career.
Yes. And I've always felt, and I've always said the following thing, that I always felt on my own, but never alone. I always felt that I had my family with me, that I was free, but with my family. Not holding me down, setting me free.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which was remarkable.
You had left South Africa by this stage, or you're still there?
I left South Africa a few years later because once I had the blessing from my father, I joined an ad agency in South Africa, an American ad agency. And a few years later, they sent me to Hong Kong and Greece and Mexico and all over the world. And then it all started.
So what was South Africa like at the time under the white apartheid and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah,
Was it very challenging for a Greek South African?
You know something? Growing up as a kid, we didn't really, and I think that applies to me and my siblings, we didn't really regard ourselves as being different to other kids. Yes, we were Greek. We had a funny name, which people sometimes couldn't pronounce, okay? But that was it. But we felt really fully integrated. So South Africa didn't have this, maybe because of the black-white divide, there was the sense of unity, this real sense of unity.
And were there a lot of Greek restaurants around at that time? Because it sounds like the South Africans I've bumped into, they're still very connected with their culture, even though in your case, your grandparents were born there. So
Yeah.
I know most Greeks, I guess, even in the States, they tend to lose their identity quite quickly, or they did back when I was backpacking. So what made you stay connected to your Greek heritage and Greek culture?
Interesting. I think that there were two types of Greeks. If your parents were first generation immigrants, then you tended to really stick within the community. I guess because of comfort, reasons of comfort, right? But if you were second, third generation like we were, you tended to open a lot more. We were very connected to our Greekness, basically through lunch at my grandmother's on Sunday, to tell you the truth. That's really where the connection happened. And it was powerful. And it was wonderful, right?
Yeah.
I remember having lunch in this huge kitchen, which wasn't that huge. I was tiny.
Yeah.
This huge kitchen with all the cousins and, the full catastrophe, right? Everybody was there. And it was fabulous.
Great reference, by the way, the full catastrophe. Great reference.
So then we talked a few years later, you went off to the States. Was that your first city outside of South Africa? First country?
No, it wasn't. What happened was that they sent me to Hong Kong.
Ooh.
And I went to Hong Kong and I worked there for about 2 years. And I remember once I got a call when I was in Hong Kong from this guy in New York, from our central headquarters in New York. And he says to me, "You're Greek, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You speak Greek?" I lied to him and I said, "Fluently." And the next thing I knew, I was flying off to Athens as the new CEO of McCann Erickson here in Athens, right?
Kitty.
That's when I ordered a salad with batouria.
Well, fake it till you make it. The classic example, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Classic.
Well, what gave you the confidence?
So you ordered a salad of what? Window
shutters.
Window shutters. Classic.
Fortunately, they didn't have any.
Oh, there you go. You did explain what that means,
explain what it means. Yeah, salata me patzuria is a salad with
beetroot.
Well, patzaria is beetroot. Patzuria is window shutters for the lay people among us. But I'm interested to hear, Peter, what gave you... I mean, it takes balls to say, yes, I'm fluent in Greek and then be sent somewhere to action. What gave you the confidence that you could go to Greece and be able to be passable?
I think one of the remarkable things that my father imbued me with was confidence. One of the remarkable things. Okay. He was really quite a remarkable person. I really, really pay a lot of tribute to my father.
What was your father's name?
Dimitri, Jimmy.
Dimitri.
I went to university when I was 16 years old. in another city, by the way. I went to Cape Town on my own. So courage was my father, he encouraged me to do stuff like that. And I felt good doing it. It was fine.
Wow. It's a big thing, letting your 16-year-old go to another city to study.
Yeah.
So you lived on your own.
It is a very big thing. Yeah.
Definitely.
It's a very big thing.
Yeah. So did you live with people? Did you?
The first place that I stayed at was with a family. I had a room in their house. I stayed there for a couple of months, and then I took my own apartment, and I was on my own. And I loved it.
You're very independent at such a young age.
Well, I'm getting the distinct impression, though, that a lot of that came down to your father's influence. It sounds a lot like he didn't want to hinder you. He didn't want to obstruct someone who obviously had the confidence, within himself to keep going. And that is a very rare thing.
It's a very rare thing. The remarkable thing about him is that he had 3 kids. He read each of us separately. And he understood each of us for who we were. And he gave each of us a different kind of freedom, which was amazing, really quite amazing.
I want to ask you about why, because I understand that you first studied economics with a name like Economides. Probably not surprising, but what made you eventually jump ship and go to the other end of the spectrum with marketing and branding?
So my degree was focused on economics, but I did marketing at the same time. Okay,
right.
And so I did marketing, I did economics, and I did a lot of the social sciences. And I just found myself gravitating far more towards the behavioral side of things rather than the numbers side of things.
Sure.
So I found myself drifting towards what makes people do things rather than what people do, if that makes sense, which took me very naturally into marketing and branding because that's all about people.
So I think we got to the bit where you just became CEO of a company in Athens. So what was that like? So obviously the person that asked you if you could speak Greek fluently wasn't Greek, otherwise you would have got quit out quite quickly. So what was that like when you first landed in Greece and you've been sold as this person that could speak Greek fluently? How did that pan out?
Aside from the salad.
Well, what I did was I just learned as much Greek as I possibly could in a shorter time as possible. And really, beyond speaking Greek, I had this innate understanding of what Greek's all about because of the way that I'd grown up. So nothing was foreign to me, is what I'm saying to you. So I think I fitted in rather well, and we managed to build a very, very good ad agency in Greece at the time. Won lots and lots of international prizes for our work and all sorts of wonderful stuff like that.
So what sort of things were you working on there?
Some of the clients that I had at the time, we had the typical McCann Erickson international clients, which are Coca-Cola, Nestlé, Unilever, clients like that.
Right.
But I also did the relaunch of Metaxa brandy.
Okay.
I worked on Greek tourism, a campaign which had as a line "Chosen by the Gods."
Yes.
That was back in the late 80s. So all sorts of stuff, a mixture of Greek and international clients.
What was the path then from being in Greece to then ultimately, branching out to the US and to South America?
Well, my next move from Greece was to become CEO of McCann Erickson in Mexico. The Mexican agency was one of the biggest in the network. They asked me to go down there as CEO, and I went down, CEO and Senior Vice President for Latin America. And I spent, I think it was 4 years there, which was wonderful. I really stretched my wings there and learned a whole lot of stuff. And I was kidnapped, by the way, in Mexico City, which is another story.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? What happened there?
Yeah. I was at a dinner. I had a driver who was also, I guess, a bodyguard. One of our clients was General Motors. I used to drive a huge Cadillac. Bit of a mistake in Mexico City, but anyway. And I said to my driver, "You go home, I'll drive." It was late at night. He said, "Are you sure, senor?" I said, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And off I went. And I did what you do at night in Mexico City. The traffic light was red, and I cautiously went through it because you don't stop at red lights late at night. It's dangerous. And all of a sudden, this police car cuts me off. The policeman gets out. He comes to my window, and I did what you naturally do in Mexico, license with $100 bill. I got back the license without the $100. This is what you expect. He speaks to me in Spanish. I pretend that I can't speak a word. And the next minute, his colleague goes to the passenger door, opens up the door, gets in, sits down in the seat next to me and pulls out a gun. And he says to me, now you do whatever I tell you to do. And the adventure started.
Was he in a police uniform?
Yes.
Wow.
And he told me exactly where to go left, go right, giving me directions. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I said to myself, I need to get close to the office. I was going to ram the car into the office building because I had security guards inside there. I thought that was the best thing I could do. Mm-hmm. And I drove past the Four Seasons Hotel and I made a snap decision. And I put my foot on the gas. Car skidded into the entrance of the Four Seasons. I opened the door and I ran inside.
Wow.
Yeah, it was scary. It was
unbelievable.
Scary.
So you went into the lobby area, obviously, the drive-through.
Yeah.
What was the guy doing in the did he have a seatbelt on?
I don't know. he got out.
I doubt the kidnapper would have a seatbelt on.
That's what I was saying. If you slammed the brakes, he would have gone flying and killed himself.
I don't know. But his colleague was behind me, so he got out of the car, got into the police car, and they disappeared.
Wow.
I called my wife up because she was at home, and he knew exactly where I lived because he'd gone through all the papers in the car and all sorts of stuff like that. I said to just get over here. And then we lived after that with security in the house 24/7.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
So the police were in police uniform and in a police car.
Yeah.
Unbelievable,
huh?
What year was this?
It was early 95.
Yeah. Did you expect a kidnapping story, Nick?
No.
I certainly didn't.
Out.
Wow, Peter.
Well, unbelievable, eh?
Yeah.
Who knows how that would have panned out, but it's great that maybe it was your growing up in South Africa or instincts that made you get out of that. Who knows how it would have ended up.
Well, I'm so glad that you did manage to get out of that because we might not have had the Think Different campaign afterwards.
You're right.
which is just after that, if I'm not mistaken regarding the timeline. How did that come about? How were you approached, or how was the organization approached, and how was it pitched to you guys?
I left McCann Erickson and I joined TBWA. TBWA was founded by a Greek, by the way, a guy called Bill Tragos, Vasilis Tragos. His family origins originally from Kalamata, remarkable guy. Okay. While I was still in Mexico, it's worth telling you the story. Whilst I was in Mexico, I got a call one day from Tragos. I was in my car. And the phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's Bill Tragos. And I'm like, wow, I mean, he's a legend in advertising. What's this guy doing calling me? And he says, I've heard a lot about you, and I want to meet you. Come up for lunch in Connecticut this weekend. You can have lunch with me and my wife. If my wife likes you, you'll come to a board meeting of TBWA. We want to offer you a job. As I say it, okay? As I say it.
Yes.
So I flew up and I had lunch with Bill and his wife. After lunch, he said to me, my wife likes you. And I went to a board meeting and he offered me a job. I didn't take it at the time, but a couple of years later when I was in New York, we spoke again and I decided to leave McCann Erickson and join TBWA. So in the meantime, Apple is on the verge of bankruptcy. And it's hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. 1997, the company was about to close. Years earlier, Steve Jobs had hired a guy called John Scully, former executive from Pepsi-Cola, who made a decision to get rid of Steve Jobs. So he fired Steve Jobs, asked Steve to leave the company, and they started to become more and more like Microsoft. They started to move to the center of the market, if you like. Okay.
But Steve Jobs was still part owner, wasn't he?
He was part owner, yes, but he was not involved at all. By the time that 1997 came around, this was around August 97, frankly, there was no reason for anybody to buy a Macintosh. They'd become expensive. Windows was on the market. It was pretty good. So all the advantages that Apple had just disappeared. And the company was literally on the verge of bankruptcy, and they asked Steve Jobs to come back.
Who had also started Next by this point as well, which was quite a big player in the market at that point.
That's correct. So Steve Jobs goes back, and the first thing he does is he contacts a fellow called Lee Clow. Lee Clow is a creative guy who worked for us in Los Angeles, brilliant creative guy, who is the guy behind the very famous 1984 commercial,
Yes.
which launched the first Apple computer, in fact. Okay, not the first Apple computer, but the first Macintosh.
Legendary ad.
Legendary ad, which, by the way, played once.
Really?
Is that right?
Yes, once.
Wow.
It's remarkable, remarkable. So he contacted Lee, and they started talking to each other and working on reinvigorating Apple. And I was in New York, and I was responsible for the global network. So I flew out to California to meet Steve Jobs and to convince him that we were the right company to work with Apple around the world. And that was the beginning of my involvement in the whole Think Different story. Okay.
Wow.
By the way, a little anecdote about Think Different. We had developed the campaign. We were about to launch it globally. And I made a trip around the world just to make sure that there were no issues, cultural issues with Think Different and what the commercial was saying in different parts of the world. The British said to me, it's grammatically incorrect.
Which is true, but...
It's true. It should be think differently. And they said to me, over our dead bodies will we run that in the UK. I said, okay, and I made a note of that. I then went to Japan, and they said, it'll never work here. I said, why not? Because we all want to be the same.
Wow.
I said, okay, I made a note of that. So I said to Steve Jobs, I said, we have a problem with the Brits and the Japanese, right? You know what he says to me? Screw the Brits, screw the Japs. That's the way we speak in California. And by the way, this to me is crucial. Brand is true to itself. Brand is a reflection of who you are. It's what Aristotle called ethos. It's your character. It's who you are. Okay. The more and more I work on branding in today's modern world, the more I understand that Aristotle said it all when he spoke about rhetoric. All right, logos, ethos, pathos. It's what branding is all about today.
Wow. I just got a chill.
Yeah, fantastic. So
genuinely
tuning into Aristotle.
But it is so important to be true to yourself, because a lot of brands and a lot of startups, a lot of organizations try to be everything to all people. And when you try to do that, you end up being nothing to anyone.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You know something? To me, a great brand connects with the roots of what it is. It digs deep into the past in order to dig out the roots, but then it moves way into the future with that. Okay? But it creates a continuous line. It creates a bridge, if you like, between where you come from and where you're going. And it describes that path before you take up the journey. Think Different did exactly that for Apple.
And what was the reaction like when that ad first dropped, or when you first saw it? And I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say that you may have had something to do with Maria Callas in the final cut. But I mean, what was the reaction like initially?
Remember, there were two Greeks involved. Okay, there was myself and Bill Tragos. Okay,
classic. Had to be another Greek in there.
Absolutely.
The reaction was phenomenal. It's exactly what we wanted to do with that ad, which was to remind people about what Apple was really all about. Okay, because the ad, I remind you, says, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. And it finishes by saying, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Notice something, however. It doesn't use the word computer, not even once. It doesn't try to sell anything. All it does is it says, this is who I am. Ethos, Aristotle. This is my character. This is who I am.
This is my identity.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. So how did the Brits and the Japs respond to that? So initially you had negative comments from them. So you guys still went through with the campaign, and how did they respond to that?
They loved it. I can show you photographs, I guess, of people queuing up in Regent Street to buy to buy the new to buy the new product being released by Apple, and the same happened in Japan. This is something else I believe about what we do, about brand, etc. I do not like researching before we launch, right? I like
As in
to dig
market
deep
research.
into. Yes, I'm very skeptical of market research. Steve Jobs always used to say, "People don't know what they want until you show it to them." And I think we need to work with human insight, but not with human feedback in words. We need to understand people deeply and interpret that into what people will want, as opposed to asking them what they want.
Is that because people think or they repeat what they already know? Is that why you don't want the
Absolutely.
feedback?
Or people don't know what they don't know.
Absolutely. Especially in a world that is changing so rapidly, you've got to anticipate where things are going. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're just simply giving people what they already know. It's nothing. It's not worth anything.
If I'm not mistaken, the follow-up in one of your presentations to saying that was the Henry Ford quote around, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, which I think sums it all up.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Great comment.
If you don't know what a motor car is, how on earth can you know whether you want one or not? Now, think of today's world. Think of all the innovation in today's world.
In terms of Apple now as well, obviously that ad, Think Different, predated, as I said earlier, the things like iPhones and iPads and all of the line of technology that we now take for granted. Things like the iPhone in particular have changed the way we do everything. What's your relationship with Apple now as a result? I mean, if you could take yourself away from having worked on that project, do you think the impact would have been on you as a consumer would have been equally as impactful on you?
Yes. The fact that Apple has become a $3 trillion company,
3 trillion now.
unprecedented, $3 trillion in value,
Wow.
which is unbelievable. I think that is just wonderful evidence that the effect that Apple had on me is not dissimilar to the effect that Apple had on many millions of people around the world. For it to become what it has become today, obviously it's had impact on humanity. By the way, Steve Jobs always used to say, let's make a dent on the universe. And if you think about it, that's exactly what he managed to do.
So the Think Different, was it your what was your contribution to the whole campaign? Did you come up with that saying? And how close did you work with Steve Jobs?
No. Lee Clow was in charge of the creative work.
Okay.
My job was really to make sure that what we came out with was a globally appropriate, relevant bit of messaging that would do the job that needed to be done. Okay. But the actual creative work was done by Lee Clow and a group of really brilliant creative people in California.
So you worked quite closely with Steve Jobs, obviously.
Yeah.
What was he like? Give us some insights on him. Any good stories?
Well, I've worked with a couple of really smart marketing people, business people, and I think they've got a couple of things in common. They're difficult.
Oh, really?
Number one, yes. Because I guess they kind of like know what they want, or rather they know what they don't want. They have got an opinion about things, okay? They're not looking to supplement their lack of vision. They're looking to realize vision, all right? So I find that people like that, if you're not up to a conversation with them, you have no place at the table with them. And I saw that with another guy that I worked with. This was the guy who was the chief marketing officer of Coca-Cola, a guy called Sergio Zeman, legendary in marketing. We used to call him the Ayacola, by the way. which should give you a sense of what he was like.
Classic. Wow. So these innovative people, they know what they want. They just want you to come up to their level and share their dream with you, I guess. Want you to contribute.
You've got to contribute to it and take it further and make it happen. Otherwise, what the hell?
How much of that do you think comes down to just pure chemistry? Because I think I've heard you say as well, marketing is jazz, effectively. Yeah. Being with a musical background, myself, I know that when you get in the room with people to make music, oftentimes it doesn't necessarily click. There's, there are certain individuals who the magic just isn't there.
Yeah.
Do you think that's part of it? There needs to be some sort of chemistry in order to make it work?
100%. I've got to tell you that now that I am responsible for myself and not for the fortunes of a bigger company, I'm very selective with who I work with. Very selective. If I don't feel that there's a good connection and good chemistry between me and my client, I won't work on a project. Because I know what's going to happen. You've got to play jazz. You've got to play jazz.
I guess that could be said.
You've got to be in tune.
Yeah, it could be like a musical band or a football team. You're going to be in sync together. It makes sense.
Yes.
Create a good culture with the people.
But I suspect it's also a case of not necessarily just playing by the same playbook all the time, not referring to the one textbook.
Yes, there is no textbook. In fact, I say to myself on every single project, right, I know nothing. Because if you go in with assumptions, I mean, what the hell?
Yeah.
I go into every single project saying, I know nothing. And I keep myself wide open to learn, to deconstruct what I've learned, and to reconstruct it and make it more powerful.
It's very important.
Because I'm looking for truth, not some clever little advertising slogan.
So how long were you at Apple for? Did you say 4 years?
I was at TBWA. I was never at Apple, but I was at TBWA until 99. So it was like probably a 3-year journey with Apple.
So 2002.
Yeah.
And that,
no,
was
from 97.
97
From 97
to 99.
until 99, yeah.
And they were crucial years for that company. Absolutely crucial years, weren't they?
Absolutely.
From that point, obviously, you moved at some point over the next few years. You decided to move back to Greece. Now, we've all sort of, as Greeks of the diaspora, we've all sort of dreamt about going back to Greece. Many family members have either dissuaded us in some respect, and they all say, you don't know what it's really like to live in Greece. You only know it as a holiday destination. It's different. What was the pull for you to want to go back permanently?
I'll tell you something. I told you about the story that with my father when I said to him, I want to be a big deal on Madison Avenue. When I had become a big deal on Madison Avenue, because I achieved that, I said to myself, now, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Because I realized I was then living in a beautiful loft in downtown Manhattan. I mean, life was great. I was traveling all over the world. It was perfect, right? But I said to myself, is this what I want to do from this day forward? And I said to myself, no. And my head went back to my memories of Greece. The food, the people, the weather, the atmosphere, that special something which is in the air here. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay.
We do.
Definitely.
It's what makes us sick when we come back.
Yes.
It's a 3-week period of depression.
It is. It is depression.
Yes. And I dived deep into that. And I made the decision to give up all of that stuff, okay, and come back here. And I'll never forget sitting in a taxi cab in Athens, and this guy says to me, cab driver, he says, where are you from? I said, well, I've just moved to Athens. He says, well, yeah, but where'd you come from? I said, well, New York. What did you do in New York? So I told him. And he says to me, you had a good job in New York. Did you really have to come to Greece? Right? And then I look at him like, okay. Then he says to me, listen to this. He says, where are you from originally? I can hear a bit of an accent. I said, South Africa. He says, did you know that Nelson Mandela's father was Greek? I said, you're kidding me. He says, ναι παιδί μου, το όνομά του ήταν Mandilas.
Classic Mandili. What a classic.
Oh, jeez. The font of all wisdom.
Do me a favor, drop me off the next corner, okay?
Classic. Greek storytellers. Mate, cabbies are the best.
The Greek cab drivers are modern day philosophers. They're the heirs apparent.
Did he have a
Unbelievable.
gombolo and a cigarro and a frappe all at the same
Of
time?
course, of course.
But I mean, that must be part of the appeal as well, because, you know, for me, I'm a little bit younger than Nick, but going back to Greece, say in the late 80s, you know, 90s into the 2000s, there is this sort of stereotype that when you show up in Greece, everything's a lot more laid back. Customs is virtually non-existent. The guy stamping your passport is, you know, having a cigarette and, you know, having his frappe. Were things like that a concern to you, or was that part of the adventure?
Part of the adventure.
Yeah.
Totally part of the adventure.
Yeah.
Part of the appeal.
Yeah.
Part of the appeal.
Yeah. Could you imagine that?
Dear.
Yeah, as soon as you get there, it's like the tension just drops. Just everyone's relaxed. Take your watch off.
Yes.
Yeah. Like
It's a better place. It's a better place to live in the true sense of the word.
Yeah.
To be alive in the true
Yes.
sense of the word. Without worrying about stuff that you shouldn't be worrying about.
So now we're talking, what, 1999, 2000? Is that when you were back to Greece?
99, 2000, yes.
Okay, so this is a period now of, I'm going to assume a period of relative growth and expansion with you starting Felix BNI. Is that
Well,
is that
before
when it happened?
Before I started Felix BNI, I worked for a short while for TBWA as the Eastern European Regional Director. So I was involved with the Greek operation, and that I did for a couple of years just to settle back in. And then I left and I started Felix.
This is an important 10-year period from there. You know, from 2000, I mean, we saw things like the 2004 Olympics, winning the Euro Cup, all of these things. This was a really good time to be Greek, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Can I tell you something? That, to me, the period before 2004, one of the clients that I worked on was the International Olympic Committee, and I worked on something called the Olympic Truce with a remarkable fellow called Stavros Lambrinidis, who's now the EU ambassador to the US, by the way. Wonderful guy. And we did something for Olympic Truce, which was to try to get the Greek heart of the Games back into what the Olympic Games are all about, okay? Because in the beginning, the Olympic Games were held with the idea of trying out peace. And in fact, the line that I developed for Olympic Truce was, if we can have peace for 16 days, then maybe, just maybe, we can have it forever, okay? To really capture the soul of what truce is really all about. It was a remarkable time when Greece was doing amazing stuff. Unfortunately, straight after the Games...
Yeah. Sorry, so what made you see that? What were the telltale signs that things are going awry now?
I used to live in Plaka, the beautiful, beautiful Plaka district in Athens. The first signs that I had that things weren't going right was the contrast between what Plaka was before the Games, during the Games, and after the Games, okay? It became a very difficult place to live in after the Games. I decided to move out of Plaka. The streets were a mess. I had drug addicts on my doorstep every day. It was just like, wow, it was unpleasant. It was really unpleasant. And I said to myself, no.
Yeah, well, what do you think that was, though? Because we would have been on such a high. The Olympics were successful. Back off the Euro, there would have been a lot of money going into the city, or there wasn't. What was the drop-off?
I think that what happened, in my opinion, was that we had a very successful few years. I mean, 2004 was remarkable if you think about it. And after that, we had all these wonderful facilities in the city. We did not use them smartly. We did not take the impetus of the Games to push Greece forward, is what I'm saying to you. Okay. So it became an expense rather than an investment in the future, if that makes sense.
Right.
I think that's the essence of it. It became a huge expense to the nation as opposed to what it should have been, which is an investment in our future.
Do most Olympics make a profit that you know of? Because is it a common theme amongst a country once they've had the Olympics, they struggle afterwards, or is it the opposite?
I think that what happens in some countries is that you suddenly find that the impetus of the Games gives rise to new usage of those buildings, a new spirit of national pride, and all sorts of stuff like that. Example, by the way, is Spain, which really utilized what they built up during the Olympics. Yes, they really utilized it. Greece didn't do that. They didn't do that.
So was it a matter of just get the Olympics? We don't want to embarrass ourselves. Do what we have to do? Get them over the line, do a good one. But they didn't think of ramifications afterwards.
Probably. I think one of the examples which I always used to speak about in those days, it comes back to me right now. We had something called the International Broadcasting Center, okay, which was the entire technological hub where the games were broadcast from there, right? And if you think about 2004, it was a pivotal time in terms of technology. So what we had inside that building was state-of-the-art, which probably no other country had. You know what we did? We converted that building into a shopping mall.
Is that the mall there now?
I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
This is the kind
building.
of thing I'm talking about.
Okay.
Wow.
Right. So instead of taking that as an investment and then utilizing it going into the future, right? We spent it.
Wow.
And would you say that's the beginning of Greece falling into the GFC in 2010?
Yeah, I think so. I really do think so.
I mean, it's obviously a very difficult period looking back on that, which to some degree, Greece seems to be coming out of, depending on who you ask. Things are certainly better there now. But part of what happened during that period from 2009, leading in was your presentation, Rebranding Greece, which, for me personally was a huge moment. I mean, I was in Greece when that presentation was given, and not long afterwards, it ended up on YouTube, and everyone was sharing it.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how that presentation came about, because watching back, it's very hard to separate that presentation as a brand presentation from it being a manifesto about what Greece as a country or what the philosophy of the country needs to be. I almost felt as though you needed to run for Prime Minister after that.
I was asked to give a talk on the brand Greece at a conference up in Thessaloniki on the 11th of November, 2011, by the way. And I said to myself that the problem with Greece is not brand Greece. In fact, we got a wonderful brand if you think about it. The islands, the beaches, the archaeology, the history, the classics, etc., etc., etc. The problem is the Greeks. And I said to myself, rebranding Greece is really about rebranding Greeks. And I remember a phrase that I used during that presentation. I said, Greece is one of the best brands that's never been branded.
Yep.
And it's true. It's absolutely true. It's a great brand by default. But at the time, in 2011, if you spoke to Greeks, especially, by the way, young Greeks, about Greece, they didn't feel it. They wanted to be somewhere else. They were living in misery, frankly. Okay. And I went out with that talk, and then a couple of months later, Google asked me to give a talk, and there I spoke about Gillette.
Yeah.
And I said, the second most popular word, the most popular word in this country is the one that starts with M.
Which you can say on this podcast, by the way. Feel free.
Malaka. Why did
Yeah.
I say so? Okay.
Speak freely. You're among friends here.
Say that all
So
the
the
time,
most
Tom.
popular word is the word Malaka. Second most popular is then Gillette. And then I said they combine the words together. They Gillette Malaka. Okay.
That's so true.
And I spoke about the fact that if we don't get rid of the word then, we're in deep shit because we have to create our way out of this crisis. That's exactly the wording that I used. Okay. And I spoke about Piros Dimas, and I spoke about the Greek football team, certainly not saying they Unite before they entered the stadium and did the remarkable stuff that they did. And I spoke about the people who built the Acropolis. And I said, they didn't say then Unite while they were building that. Okay. That went totally viral. As a result of that, I think that contributed to a really significant mindset switch in this country. And let me tell you why I say that and what I think gives me the permission to say that. I was approached by the Dutch ambassador at the time a remarkable fellow called Jan Versteeg. And he told me that he wanted to do something to sort out the relationship between the Dutch and the Greeks, the Northern European Greek divide that existed at the time. When the Northern Europeans thought we were just lazy, good for nothing people living on the edge of Europe. And he said to me that he was thinking of doing a food festival. I said, you mean beer and cheese and tulips and stuff like that? And he said, yeah. And we started talking, and the idea of this startup incubator arose. And to his credit, remarkable credit, the Dutch embassy went ahead and dedicated about 400 square meters of their building to this startup incubator. And we invited startups to come in there. We brought in people from the Netherlands to come and inspire and give some mentoring, et cetera, et cetera. We got Dutch companies in Greece like Heineken and Friesland and various other companies to get involved. And this whole ecosystem started to rise, okay? And it was a remarkable place, 220 startups went through there. 150 of them are surviving as viable, sustainable businesses today. That's remarkable. Around that, a whole ecosystem of incubators started to arise. They saw this example happening, okay? And if I look at Greece today and I compare it to Greece back then, the dream of every young kid, and I remember this for ages in this country, was to become a civil servant, to have a nice, cushy life and retire early. Seriously.
Yes.
Yeah, I could totally relate
Seriously.
to that.
We all know those people.
Yeah, we do.
Yes. Talk to young Greeks today. They all talk about startups and ideas that they've got and about venture capital and all sorts of stuff like that. It's a huge mind shift. Massive.
Well, I think you absolutely have the right to sort of lay claim to some of that, because, I mean, I don't know if you saw the presentation at that time, Nick, but it was, as I said earlier, it was being shared everywhere. Absolutely, and particularly for me, who obviously studied and was working in that field, it was a phenomenon. People were referring to it everywhere.
Wherever you couldn't stop
Yeah, no,
talking about
it was quite remarkable.
So where does it sit now? Obviously, you've just given the example of the startups that have that have happened since then. To what extent has Greece been rebranded, or Greeks been rebranded?
Great question. I remember towards the end of 2019, I was feeling very positive about Greece. And all of a sudden, we entered COVID. Okay. And then I was talking to an American friend of mine, and he said to me, you know something, Peter? The whole world is in crisis right now. And Greece has got a distinct advantage. I said, what is that, David? He says, 10 years of practice.
That's a good point. It's a
Very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point. A couple of months ago, the Economists published a piece, a fascinating piece, by the way. I suggest you guys look at it, where they measured 30 of the world's leading economies against a whole bunch of different indices, and Greece comes out on top.
Wow.
Wow, it's fascinating.
Which is remarkable. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
One of those, by the way, is annual GDP growth.
Wow.
Okay. I honestly believe that Greece is at a point that it hasn't been for a very long time. And I think that Greece is poised to achieve great things. If ever it's going to do it, the time is now.
Yeah.
Part of that is the mindset that young people have got.
Because we did lose a lot of young Greek kids through Europe, and I guess we got heaps in Australia
We've got
and
a
so
lot here.
forth. So have they? Are they coming back now? Like, what's happening now in Greece? Because I understand.
I think that if you look at the companies who are investing in Greece these days, Google has announced their investment, Tesla's announced their investment, a whole bunch of other companies. Greece is suddenly becoming a tech hub within Europe.
It's Silicon Valley of Europe now, to some degree.
I always used to say Greece should be the west coast of Europe.
Yeah.
I always used to say that.
now
I
it's
remember
shaping
somebody
up.
once thought I was talking about Miami. And they said, well, we are that kind of. I said, no, you don't get it. We should be the west coast of Europe, right?
Yeah.
I'm involved in a project which I can't divulge too much about, which is terribly exciting, where what we say is that Athens should be everything that Athens is, but to the max, without trying to be the new Berlin, which is the kind of language I used to listen to in the past, or the new London. Right? That's rubbish.
Yeah.
We should be the best version of ourselves, which gets back to my thinking about branding, by the way.
Yeah.
I think that you're going to find all these kids who left, you're going to find them being attracted straight back here, as long as the right kind of things happen. And I think that if they're ever going to happen, the time is now.
Yeah.
Well, what are those things that you're talking about? What are those right things?
A whole bunch of things. It starts with tourism, numbers going up. It's happening like crazy.
It's huge.
Greece has suddenly become, it's huge, it's massive. I read an article the other day. By the way, I have not read an article like this ever, which said Athens is the city where most of the world would love to live. Wow.
And what
Now,
was the
if
source
you
of
get
that article?
stuff like that, it was published in one of the hip, cool magazines. Okay? Can't remember which one.
Sure.
Now, the more you get stuff like that out there, the more it influences the way that people perceive what Greece is all about. The more it influences the young kids who left to want to come back. The more it influences people who are not here to want to be here, and so on and so forth. And it hits tourism, it hits Greek cuisine, which, by the way, I think is one of our big treasures. Yep. It hits Greek products around the world, all sorts of things. It hits anything with the label Greek attached to it. So I think that we are on the verge of great possibility. I don't want to say great things, the possibility of great things.
Yeah.
Potential.
I think what's really interesting at the moment as well is that, and you and I were having this discussion a few weeks ago, Greece seems to be positioning itself, number one, as, again, the Silicon Valley of Europe right now, but is actually also taking quite a leadership role when it comes to things like the environment, the banning of plastics, going to renewable energy. I think there are a number of islands that are already running to some degree off their own power.
Yes, you're right. 2 or 3 of them, yeah.
I mean, nowhere else in Europe is this happening. Greece is going to be leading this. This is a very unique position and time for this country now, isn't it?
Yes. And it makes me feel that the past 30 or 40 years is a blemish on Greece, but not much more than that. Right. And I hope I'm right.
I think we all do.
All by getting rid of one word, eh?
Yeah.
Then yinete to yinete.
Yes.
It's a good song.
It's crucial. It's crucial.
Yeah. So if you had to define a Greek now, how would you define a Greek now?
Δώσ' μου το τσιγάρο μου, ρε φίλε.
But that is part of us.
Greek now.
That is part of us.
It is part of us.
Yeah, because you're saying we have changed from early 2000s to now.
Yes.
How would you define?
I think it's generational.
True Greek?
The answer to that is generational. Okay. If I look at a young Greek under the age of 25, a young Greek under the age of 25 is a restless young individual who wants to do more than this society traditionally would allow him to do. That's how I would define that young Greek under 25. The older Greeks, frankly, no change. Yeah.
So you're saying in the next 20, 30 years, Greece, if we have these young 25-year-olds with that mindset, who knows where we'll be?
Absolutely. And as long as you've also got an infrastructure being built which allows them to grow.
And I guess how important it is, because we haven't really talked about leadership yet. So how important is having a good, strong leader to enhance, encourage these young potential entrepreneurs? And I guess in inviting businesses into Greece.
Crucial. Absolutely crucial. It's absolutely crucial. And I think that when I talk about infrastructure, throw that in there as well. In other words, you might have this young generation which has got all the right things happening in terms of mindset, but if we don't facilitate them and continue to inspire them, they won't stick around. We'll go back to where we were. And by the way, inspiration comes in many different forms. Huh? For example, and this is one of my favorite subjects, shipping.
Okay.
The US accounts for 16% of the world's production. Okay. Greece accounts for 19% of the world's transportation. Who's the superpower?
That's very interesting.
Definitely.
Who's the superpower? Now, I'm not saying that we need to tell the world this. I'm saying that we need to tell ourselves this, which is why it gets back to rebranding Greeks. I remember growing up as a kid in South Africa, I was super conscious of the fact that South Africa was the world's leading gold producer. Right? And it did things for my psyche, how I felt.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts around the way Greece has been branding tourism in particular? Let's talk about, I mean, most people think in Australia in particular, when they think Greece, they think the Greek islands, they think of the ads that they see. Is AOT doing a good job of it at the moment? We've seen some really interesting ads over the last few years and some very interesting campaigns. Are you satisfied with the direction that these projects are going in?
I think that AOT is doing, obviously it's doing a good job because the numbers are going up, but I think that we can do even more. I think we can do even more. I really do. I think that we've got so much uniqueness in this country. We've got so much to tap into.
Yeah.
And I still think that we are one of the best brands that's never been branded.
Yeah.
Yes, we're selling our beautiful beaches, our beautiful seas, and all that kind of stuff. But there's more to it. There's much more to it. I think, for example, that culinary tourism is potentially huge, massive.
Yes.
Massive. I'm very much involved with food products globally. I, in fact, did some branding work for a vegan cheese produced in Drama in northern Greece.
Really?
Which, by the way, has become the world's largest selling vegan cheese. It was sold recently to Unilever. It's massive. Okay.
Unbelievable.
Fantastic.
It's called VO Life. Vegan cheese. Now, with the way the world is moving, with all this interest in health and well-being, we've got this gem called the Greek Mediterranean diet. Okay? We eat very well, and our food is also very, very tasty. It's a gem. It's an absolute gem. Absolute gem.
Yeah, it's not like it's a gold mine to tap into. We've always had it.
Yes.
But you're right, we don't really sell it enough.
No, we don't.
And this is where the world is heading, so why not?
Yes. And by the way, the trends are so firm behind what I'm talking about.
How much of this is us needing to own the story and own the narrative?
I think that it's important that we own the story and we own the narrative, but more than own it, we've got to connect ourselves with the story and the narrative in a way that the world nods their heads and says, yes, that is a good, powerful connection and it's right. And if you think about Greece, that connection is there. We need to make sure that it becomes a very tight, firm connection. Okay.
Yeah.
For example, one of the blue zones we've got right here in Greece, on the island of Ikaria, right? Remarkable place, by the way.
Sure.
Where people live until the age of 105, 110.
Yes.
Did you see the New York Times article on that?
There's been a few articles on
where
people.
people forget to die.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
It was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
By the way, I visited Ikaria last year, the year before. I was doing some work for an interesting global company in that area of health and well-being. And I learned something there. It is politically incorrect to call yourself old until you reach the age of 90.
Really?
Wow.
So you're not allowed to think like that.
They're rebranding age.
Yes. Brilliant. It's brilliant.
Crazy. Yeah. Look, it's funny that you talk about the food because we talk about it all the time. And I remember one particular story when I was in Greece and talking to my cousins, and we're talking about watermelon. And I hadn't seen black seeds in watermelon for a very long time because here in Australia, it's all genetically modified. The seeds are white and they're tiny. Some watermelons don't even have seeds. And he couldn't fathom the idea. He goes, what do you mean there's no black seeds in watermelon? He couldn't understand it.
Of course.
Do you think Greece will move to the Western way of producing produce and genetically modifying stuff and making them quicker for consumption?
If we don't successfully position ourselves in the food area, the answer is yes, we will. If we position ourselves successfully and we turn this into an asset, no, we won't.
Yeah, so it's really important what you're saying. We've got to be innovators. Don't look over your shoulder and how they do things in the West.
Yes, no, we need to do it ourselves, our way. And by the way, it goes back to what we were saying right at the beginning of this conversation about anticipating what people want. If you look at all the trends about the generational shifts that are happening in the world, health and well-being is way up at the top. So if you get that insight, it kind of tells you what you should be doing with this absolute treasure called the Greek Mediterranean diet.
Yeah. To use the Canadian or the hockey term, the Wayne Gretzky term for this, it's about being where the puck is going to be, not where it is right now. And that was his success.
That's it. That's absolutely it. That's great. I'm going to use that, by the way.
I'll be very proud if I hear that in one of your talks.
By the way, I am involved in a massive project. I'm one of the shareholders in a massive project around the Greek Mediterranean diet, which is a food hall in the center of Athens. Okay, it's called Stoa, and it's the Greek food connection. Stoa, of course, is an arcade which connects things. Okay, and it's in the old Stoa to Viβλio in the middle of Athens, and it's going to be dedicated to the Greek Mediterranean diet.
Wow.
A huge development. Massive.
And when's this going to be launching?
Well, we're scheduling that for April of 2024.
Well, there are more reasons for us to go back, Nick. Every year from now on.
Yeah.
Well, just on the food as well. I mean, last year we dedicated an episode to Greek extra virgin olive oil, and a little bit of bias on my part, but went to Kerkira and spoke to our good friends at the Governor, who produce high phenolic olive oil there that's being used for scientific research into diseases and whatnot. I understand you actually gave them an award recently, presented them with an award.
Yes, you're right. Yes. You're right. At an olive oil conference in Mytilene, you're right. Yeah.
That's right, yes. Now, I mean, so much of their success, and they say it themselves, so much of what they've done is about their branding and about the way that they've positioned themselves. Which brands in Greece are doing particularly good work when it comes to positioning themselves right now? And I mean, if you were overseas, or you had friends overseas who wanted a product that is now deemed to be quintessentially Greek, what are you recommending to them?
I think that one of the categories that has done a remarkable job is wine. It didn't feature anywhere, right? Today, Greek wine is firmly established, right? And it's got its unique niche.
Yes.
Right? With the wines from Santorini and the generic Greek varietals that exist, etc., etc. I did some work some years ago with Yero Vasilio, the producer up in northern Greece, and it was remarkably successful.
I'd love for you to...
These wines are really...
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to get your feedback on our episode. We did one on Greek wines. We went into depth.
I'll have a look at it.
Yeah, definitely. But look, we can't agree with you more. The Greek wines are amazing.
Greek wines.
Even we get them here in Sydney now. We've got a couple of places, and you're right. People are
seeking them out.
Yeah, exactly. Wine advocates are buying them in droves now, especially the Santorini ones.
That in itself is remarkable, because Australia is a major producer of incredible wines. So to have Australians looking for Greek wines is super.
Definitely, yeah. We've got several stores here in Sydney now that stock Greek wine, and they're about to. They are on mainstream outlets as well now.
In fact, going a little bit off topic, because I play a little bit of music on the side. I played at an event, a major corporate event 2 weeks ago, where they had wine tasting, and a quarter of the wines that they had present there were Greek.
That's amazing.
True story.
And I'll tell you
by the
something, 30 years ago, it was the Retsina and nothing else.
Yes.
Right.
If you remember.
Yeah, definitely.
We spoke at length about it.
And a what?
Achaia Klaus, if you remember the brand.
That one I don't know.
Not that one.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how how the perception of Greek wine has changed so dramatically over the years.
Yeah.
So what other things? So like I said, the original question was who is doing particularly good work when it comes to branding and marketing themselves as a Greek company.
Okay, so we've spoken about wines. There's two companies in similar areas, Apivita, Kores. I think they're both doing remarkably good work. George Cordes, I think, is really doing very, very interesting stuff. I'm sure you've seen his line of cosmetics, Naxos Apothecary, that
Yes.
kind of stuff. Interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Pivita was sold to a Spanish company, but it's very much a Greek brand, and I think that's doing remarkably well. But then there's some other things happening which are interesting. You've got companies like Viva Wallet, which is a payment system, right, going global out of Greece.
Wow.
Oh,
You've got Beat, the mobile taxi app, which has gone global. These, by the way, are unicorns. You know what a unicorn is?
Rarity.
A company worth, company worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. So you've got very surprising Greek success stories, which go way beyond what you traditionally associate with Greece, and takes us to that area called the West Coast of Europe, which is really interesting.
Well, this is the stories we've got to talk about, and because not many people would know a lot of this stuff as well. So this is great, good stuff, Pete. Anything else you can share with us that what are Greeks excelling in and it's hitting on the global stage?
Yes. Take a look at this.
All you need is Greece.
All you need is Greece.
Have you come across this?
No.
Nope.
Okay, this is by an artist called Caroline Rovithi, and it's full of this incredible work. Look at this, all pop art
Wow.
related to
Oh,
Greece,
wow.
right? Lemon.
That's
in a
brilliant.
can. How good's that?
That's brilliant.
It's really worth getting hold of this book. This I've got. This is something that I actually own.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Fantastic.
Artist's interpretation of a Greek flag in paint with the drips on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can
white
put.
paint.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll share that via our social media.
Yeah. So what's the concept between that image? What the Greek paint isn't, the white paint isn't dried and still running? Can you
Well,
add to
her
that?
idea there was that this is Greece crying, Greece in tears. This was done during the
Right.
crisis.
Okay. So image of a Greek flag, blue and white, and the white is running through the blue.
Paint is dripping. Exactly.
It looks like someone's crying. Okay.
Does that still resonate for you?
It's not that much the case today,
Yeah.
right? But I think we're still drying our tears. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Yeah. I remember there was an ad campaign that was fascinating with Johnny Walker. And I saw it in Greece and it said, Greece, just keep on walking. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes. Actually, speaking of some of that sort of work, the work that you did with the Benaki Museum, that particular with Willem Dafoe doing the narration, that was unbelievable work. I mean, in terms of telling that story, and I shared it with you quite some time ago. There wasn't a dry eye in the room watching that. I mean, it was absolute chills. How much, is that the point of the kind of work that you do? Is all of this about telling a narrative at the end of the day and trying to connect with people ultimately?
Absolutely, 100%. In the old days, we used to think of brand as added value. Here's my product, and now let me create a story around this to make it more attractive to you. Okay? I think in the world we live in today, it's your ethos. Who the hell are you? Okay, it's your foundational narrative, right? And around that, you can have that and something else and this tomorrow and all sorts of other stuff, right? Example is Apple. There's that strong foundational narrative, and around that, I will buy anything from a computer to a telephone, and if they launch a refrigerator tomorrow, I'm buying.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay. So is that how marketing
And it's the
campaigns are
foundational.
built today?
That's how I think they ought to be built. They're not necessarily built like that, but that's how I work.
Or successful ones,
I look
anyway.
for that foundational. Yes. With the Benaki, it's the foundational narrative that we were looking for. And by the way, creating that strong connection is crucial. It's crucial. It's crucial.
Can you give us some successful examples of marketing campaigns that you've seen out there in the world that we can relate to with that example?
I think the ones that come to mind immediately, one is Nike. If you look at Nike's work, when they do their manifesto work, they're doing exactly what I talk about. When they speak about impossible. Find your greatness. It's brilliant, right? And it finishes by saying that greatness lies in each and every one of us. Greatness does not belong to a few special people. It lies inside each and every one of us. You connect with that. Yeah, you connect with that. Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's one example. By the way, Starbucks, 30,000 coffee shops around the world.
Yeah.
Okay, selling not so good coffee, rather expensive. Okay.
Great point.
The baristas at Starbucks wear an apron. Inside are written the following words: "We create inspired moments in each customer's day." It doesn't talk about the great coffee they produce. It goes back down to a foundational narrative, a connection.
Yep.
Fantastic.
So that's exactly what we need to be doing with this podcast, Nick.
So what do you recommend? What do you recommend for me and Tom here, Pete?
We don't talk about the fact that we have the greatest podcast in the world. We're connecting
That's not
people.
what you should talk about. Yes. We are acting. For example, we're acting as a link uniting 20 million Greeks around the world. For example, Greeks can relate to that.
Definitely.
Because if you think about it, we are not 10 million people. We're not 10 million Greeks. We're 20 million.
Yeah, and I mean, we've said
you
it.
guys are providing the glue. You're giving the glue around there, or the ouzo.
Yeah,
The Ouzo is our glue. I like
The
that.
ouzo is the glue.
the social lubricant that connects us all.
Yeah, it's called gluzo.
Gluzo. There you go.
Wonderful.
How good is that? Fantastic.
Peter, it's. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, like I said at the top of the show, I mean, I've wanted to get you on this show for a very long time, and I'm so glad that we've managed to have this discussion. We just continue to be able to learn from you. We thank you so much for the work that you've done, for the
Definitely.
impact that you've had, because it is a real world impact that you've had in Greece in particular, and for Greeks of the diaspora on the outside looking in, but also key for me personally as well as someone who's worked in that particular area. Thank you very much for the inspiration. I mean,
Definitely.
it's I don't know what else to say.
Thank you.
You've inspired,
Thank you, guys. Thank
next
you.
generation of Greeks, where they've got something to strive for now, and you've got a massive part to play in that. So that is, we
Thank
should
you
be
so
thanking
much.
you.
That's very touching what you guys are saying.
Peter Economides, thank you so much for being on Ouzo Talk. We are incredibly proud to have had you, and keep in touch on what you're doing. We'd love to see what you're doing next.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been a great pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, and it's really wonderful. Keep on doing what you're doing. It's great.
Thank you very much,
Definitely.
and will do. Nick, any final thoughts on that?
What do you say? A legend like that promoting Greek diaspora. There's not much more you can say.
Greek brands,
and
and a new way of thinking. Really, well, trying to change the way people are thinking about
the definition of Greeks as well. We're more innovators
Yes.
now. So fantastic. Look, awesome episode. Love talking to you, Pete, and hopefully we'll catch up in Vula one day, maybe this summer.
Maybe.
Yeah, that'll be good, guys. That'll be good. Anytime.
Fantastic.
Definitely.
ouzotalk@outlook.com is the email. Send us through your messages. Send us through any questions that you have, good or bad. It doesn't matter. We want to know about it. Join us on social media at Ouzo Talk or at Ouzo_talk on Instagram. Nick Athanasiou, thank you very much, mate.
Tom, thank you, mate. Absolute pleasure.
Ακολουθήστε μας στο Soundees, στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcasts και στο Google Podcasts.